Hello and welcome fellow humans. Today I'll be showing you a process of creating a bullet wound from sculpting to a bullet gag. First things first, I have a porcelain tile already prepped with the size of the wound and hole. I'll be starting off with just melting some clay and building my sculpt. I wanted this to have a quite deep hole for the bullet to be stuck inside with some fleshy bits around it. So I decided to make sure I have enough surface to create an illusion of a deeper hole. That's why the piece looks quite large. Boom! Some time has passed and I managed to get most of my surface area of the sculpt done. I am just using a heat gun to help me smooth out the clay and warm up my metal tool to help with that as well. I wanted to make sure all of my edges are nice, flat and smooth. After I was happy that the clay was even enough, I grabbed my rake tool, which will be linked in the description alongside any tools used in case you fancy one, and started to rake the clay to slowly introduce texture but also give it a smoother finish. I will also later finish off making the clay more skin-like with different tools. I tend to rotate between my rake tool and bristle brush to get rid of any small clay bits. I then used a small loop tool to start adding small texture inside the hole. When I was happy enough with the rake and a poking, I used some IPA to smooth out the clay and melt some clay bits to give me a smoother finish, using a small brush and a larger cut down bristle, and basically rotated this until I was happy with the results. Using a small loop tool, brush and IPA, I went in and started to add details inside the wound with fatty texture and torn skin. Using a different sculpting tool, I started to gather and smooth out the edges so they are not so harsh and become a lot more smoother, which you might think defeat the purpose of the previous raking, but the purpose of this one is to totally smooth out the clay so that we can start adding wrinkles and pores. Some of the harsh edges, I decided to use my spatula tool just to get them smoother. I am going in between with a guitar string tool, smaller rake than before, and of course bristle brush and IPA just to get the clay nice and smooth. Now it's time for the fun part. I am using a variety of different tools to add skin texture and pores, on top of a plastic sheet so that the texture is not too harsh for all that lovely detail. From a wrinkle claw tool to a pore tool and some IPA and bristle brush in between to smooth out and re-add texture. I did also end up using some more clay on top of clay just to add a bit more depth into the sculpt. It's really a back and forth process. Here's a very fast forward version of the sculpt being created. When I'm finally happy with the texture, I finish off by using a bristle brush and some baby powder that's not made out of babies and brush off any clay. Here's a closer look at the final sculpt. It's nice and shiny as I lathered it up with some Vaseline, ready for moulding. I built a thin layer of clay around the whole sculpt to be my overflow edge and a thick layer of silicone so that it's easier to move around when it's applied on skin and not tear the actual piece. I have also built a water-based clay wall ready for pouring my silicone. I measure up equal parts of Platsil Gel 25 A and B. I added a tiny bit of colour just for funsies. I then slowly pour the silicone in and make sure my whole sculpt is covered. In this instance, I've done it in 2 parts as I ran out of silicone. When that is ready and cured, I trim off the edges and clean the mould in some soapy water and some IPA and let it dry off. It's now time for the fun cap plastic. I have a pre-mixed IPA based Baldiez, 5 parts IPA and 1 part Baldiez in a cup that I pour into my big airbrush, and I spray at least 5 layers, drying each layer in between the next one. I also like to twist the moulds so that I'm not spraying the same area, or just to make sure to cover more ground. It's now time to pour the silicone into the encapsulated moulds. I have a pre-coloured Smithy's Deadener with some silicone pigments and some red and blue flocking to match my desired skin colour. I have worked out the grams of each component that I require for 110% softener. I will link the website I used down in the description. It's absolutely amazing. When the silicone mixture is ready and mixed well, I pour it from a height to get rid of any bubbles, then using a large spatula, smooth it out and let it cure. When the silicone piece is fully cured, I use some baby powder and slowly remove it from the mould. It's time for the fun blood gag. I have a plastic bin bag that I'm drawing on top of my wound so that I know where I want the blood to come out from. Just a little tip to make sure your bag is folded so that when we're cutting out what we need, you already have 2 copies of it. The middle line is where the blood will be coming out from, and the dotted line is where I'll be cutting it out, aka that's where it's going to be stuck on our Opsite tape. It'll make sense in a second. I then proceed to cut a size that will fit my bladder on the Opsite tape. Again, you need 2 copies of this. I did draw the outline just to help me out later to align it on the tape. I then cut out the middle dotted line, making sure that the bag underneath it is still attached, as I need both of these copies. I then take off the white backside from the Opsite tape so I can attach one of my plastic bag cutouts. It gets very fiddly. I then stick one of the plastic bags in the middle of the Opsite sticky side tape. For the purpose of this demo, I have also stuck a heat shrink tube that will fit in my blood tube later on, so that's easier on the day. I do exactly the same on the other Opsite tape that I cut off, which is exactly the same. The position of the plastic bag needs to match up together when we stick them both on top of each other. When they are both stuck on each other, I blow into the tube to make sure it's all aligned nicely. I then proceed to cut away just to make it a tad smaller. I forgot to film this part, but I have also cut a small V shape in the small line where I want my blood to come out. It's easy to blow in it a tad, and using a sharp scissor, cut your desired hole. Boom! Here's a test of the blood gag. I have attached a small garden pump to a plastic tube inside of our blood rig that will allow the blood to flow out of my desired blood hole that we have created. And ta-da! Here's some bonus 2 pictures from the shoot of the wound applied with a prop bullet wound inside it with blood and no blood. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you next time.